my eyes to see the spiritual truth today? And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. Now we put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with is that you are never alone. You are never alone. God is with you all of the time through thick and through thin. Sometimes we feel like we're alone because we don't have a human being. We don't have a person that we think really and truly understands what it means to go to work every single day at a job we hate. Sometimes we think we're alone because we don't have that one person that truly gets how hard it is to raise a family on the money we've got coming in our life. Sometimes we feel like we're all alone because our marriage, something's wrong with it. We don't know what it is. We can't put our finger on it. And we don't have one person that kind of gets what's going on for us, and we feel alone. Look, here is the spiritual truth, and that is this. The only one that can help you through any mess, sometimes, especially, any mess, is God. That's who helps us out. I hope you have good friends. I hope you have friends who understand you and love you and support you. I hope that for you. But the only person who can really get you out of the mess that you might have gotten yourself into in any area of your life is God. That's who can get us out of that mess and keep it from coming back. You might be able to get out of it for a minute, but have you ever noticed that you have certain areas in your life, whether it's love or money or career or something, that keep repeating themselves and repeating themselves and repeating themselves? You're never alone in those situations. Presence of God is always with you. And when we begin to understand God and how God works, when we begin to understand, I'm not talking about a God in the sky that can reach down and bail us out of our stuff. I'm talking about a spiritual principle that is available to us through thick and through thin. We have to be able to learn how to align ourselves with those spiritual principles. God never gives up on us. And for every problem there is on the planet, there is a spiritual solution. And today we're going to look at a story that is told by Jews all over the world that can help us begin to look at where spiritual principles might be in our lives that will lift us up out of freedom, into freedom, out of bondage in our life. The story is the story of Passover. And it's told this time of year by families all over the world. We're going to tell it again today. Now, here's what I want you to know about this story. It's from the Bible. And if you're visiting here today, what you want to know about what we believe is that we believe that we are every part of every character in the Bible. We are the successful characters, and we are the characters who are on detour from their success. Maybe you're on detour this morning in some area of your life. You are that character too, and they're all available to us in all of these stories. Now, some of you who are Jewish may say, you know what, I don't know why I came today. I know the story of Passover. Some of you who have been coming to this church for a while may also say, you know what, I've heard this. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. I don't want you to miss the healing today because you think you've heard the story before. You haven't heard this story. You may have heard last year's Passover story, but you haven't heard this year's Passover story. And the reason that you haven't heard it is the story's not changing. And what I'm saying about the story doesn't change a whole lot either. What's changing is you. There's something of a healing in this story for you this morning. But you have to stay alert to it. You can't go to sleep. Oh, I know what's coming next. Oh, I know what's happening next. Stay right with the story so that you can get the healing that is just there for you this morning. Well, it begins when life for the Jews is very thin. You know, I've said God is with you thick and thin, and sometimes we have to know that God is with us for the thin. A new king comes to pass in this area of Egypt. Now, a king in Egypt during those times was called a pharaoh. New pharaoh comes to town, and he begins to notice something. He says, you know, the Jews, the tribes of the Jews are growing. They're getting bigger. I never noticed it before, but now I'm noticing they're getting bigger. And I'm feeling less comfortable in my life. I'm feeling a little more threatened in my life. So I'm going to tell him to stop having babies. And he does. He sends an edict out. Please stop having babies. But a good idea in the mind of God can't be stopped. A baby is a good idea in the mind of God. It can't be stopped. And so he does what we do. He tried to control it. And when it didn't work, how many of us have said to our kids, look, I've told you this 1,000,000 times. You haven't done it. And so now I'm going to create a consequence. And that's what the Pharaoh did. He said, I've told you. I've sent out a number of notes. I've made a number of speeches. You keep having babies. Your tribes keep growing. I'm scared. And so now I'm going to send an edict, and it is to kill all of the male babies that are born. Now, before we get our lips all pursed up and think, oh, how could anybody do that to a little baby? You and I do it all the time. You and I do that all the time. When there's something inside of us that wants to be born that scares us, if there's something inside of somebody else that is wanting to be born, it scares us, and we try and control it. We try and stop it. We do the exact same thing. There's a Pharaoh inside of us that we allow to have reign over us, and what we do is we kill dreams. We kill spirits. We kill next steps. I have a friend who grew up evangelical Christian, and he tried as hard as he possibly could to kill his love of dance because he had a king that he was told thought it was bad for him to dance. I have friends who want to be entrepreneurs, who are ready to step out, take risks in their life. And they have spouses and parents that are saying, hey, we got kids to feed here. You better not do that. They have a Pharaoh called either or. The majesty either or. There's no either or. You can do both. I've got people who want to have a beloved so much in their life, but they've screwed up so many times that they're afraid to step out. And so they kill that dream of romance. They protect themselves. They kill it. We do the same thing the Pharaoh did to the male babies to ourselves. Ernest Holmes, our founder, says, look, principle is never bound by precedent. And that's just a clergy way of saying that the natural way of God that is good, that is love, that is harmony, that is peace, that is your success, can never be killed by how many times you've screwed up in the past. It's always there. Hope is always there. Spiritual principle is always there. We need to be careful. We need to, if you will come to church regularly, I'm so happy to see all of you here this morning. If you will come to church regularly, if you will get into a class, if you will read just a tiny little bit of spiritual reading every day, 3 minutes. Do you have 3 minutes for God? Yes, you do. If you would do that, you will dethrone the Pharaoh inside of you that is killing your dreams or trying to enlist you in killing somebody else's dreams because you're afraid of how big they're getting. I have a friend who is going to the gym and is looking really good, and there's a part of me that wants to just shoot her. I know I'm not the only one, too. I know that. See? That's the Pharaoh inside of me that says if somebody else is free from their bondage, that something is wrong with it. I can't get there too. No, we can all get there. We can get there together. See, if Greater Life wants to be birthed through you, it will happen. You cannot keep a good idea in the mind of God down for long. Well, shortly after the edict of I'm going to kill all the male babies, the woman has a baby. A woman has a baby, and it's a boy, and she does what we do. She had something that she was afraid of. She was afraid she'd lose him, and so she hid him. And that's what we do. We hide something until it gets so big, we have to do something about it. See, her son grew so large, she had to do something. She had to let him go in order for him to live and in order for her to live. Don't miss this point. You and I try and hide our addiction. You know, we know we're drinking too much. We know it. But until it gets too big in our lives and other people start knowing it, we don't do anything about it. Until it gets so big, we have to do something about it in order to stay alive in our lives. Sometimes our money stuff is so out of control, we try and hide it until it gets so big, other people know it. We have to do something about it in order to stay alive in our lives. Sometimes our health practices are so bad. You know, we ignore it so long until it's a big problem. We have to do something about it in our life in order to stay alive. Our work habits are so bad. And we don't do anything about it until it gets so big. And now a supervisor, manager, somebody else knows about it. We have to do it in order to stay alive in our jobs. It's a common thing for us to do. But here's the thing. We could have been doing it much sooner. We could have been doing all of those things much sooner. Well, she has to get rid of the baby. And so she wraps him up in a little papyrus boat. And she sends him down the river, the Amazon, the Nile. She sends him down the Nile. Or the Amazon, or one of those rivers. She sends him down. And what happens is, there's a very smart sister who runs along the river bank of the Nile and notices that there is a woman sunbathing there on the river, and it's the Pharaoh's daughter. It's the same Pharaoh that had the edict. It's her daughter. And she's curious. She sees this little papyrus boat going down the river, and she wonders what's in it. I always love this part of the story. It has nothing to do with anything, but I have to tell it. So there's a lot of snakes and crocodiles in the river, and she doesn't want to go out and see what's in the little boat. So she sends her handmaiden. You go on, go out there and see. Swim fast, because, there's a teaching point there. I'm not going to go there today, but here's the point. She brings the baby back, and the daughter raises the baby Moses. And what she does is she lets Moses know that he is, although she raises him with love in the Pharaoh's house and he has everything he wants, he's raised as a beloved son, he knows he's a Jew. And he needs to be with his people sometimes. And this is a point that I always like to bring up every Passover because it's important in a church like ours. In a church like ours where we have lots of different people. God bless this church. We are a great diverse church with lots of different folks. And yet there are times in this diversity where we have to be just with our own tribe, our own clan. People of color need to be with people of color. Gay people need to be with gay people. Men need to be with men. Women need to be with women. We need to do that so that we can become strong. And there's a certain restfulness about being with your own inner tribe. We get each other's pain without having any explanation needed. We get each other's jokes without any explanation needed. We don't have to be as careful about our language as we need to be when we're all mixed up together. And that's a blessing. We support that at this church. We understand what oneness means. We get it completely. That under all this exterior, we are just one being in many different costumes, in many different locations and languages. And those are important also. So he went to, the Jewish Starbucks, and he would have coffee with his homies every once in a while. Do that. And one day he's there having coffee with his guys, and he notices that a fight breaks out between an Israelite and an Egyptian. Now here's a really important point. He was not asked to involve himself in this fight. And that's important because I can tell you that in the week I worked on the prayer and preparation of this sermon twice, I was invited to stick my nose where it didn't belong, once with family and once with friends. They call up and ask me to give my opinion. Very big ego stroke. Oh, Auntie needs to give the opinion. Okay, big mess after it happened. Big mess. I should have kept my nose out of it. I think that if we don't take anything else from Passover, take this. When you are not asked, or even if you are asked to step into a fight, step back. Say, this really doesn't belong to me. The people who are involved in the stuff need to deal with their own stuff without me. Because I'm only going to make it worse, which is exactly what happened. Okay? But he didn't. He got involved, and he kills the Israelite, and now he knows, he kills the Egyptian, and now he knows that he has to leave. And so he goes away, and he starts wandering. And he happens upon a water well, and his second little codependent slip happens, and there are some young girls there who are wanting water, and there are some guys who are trying to push him away from the water, and he gets involved, and he saves the young girls so they can have water, and the young girls take him home, and the father is so grateful that he's helped them get the water for the livestock that he gives one of them to Moses. Okay, another teaching point, whole nother story that I don't have time to get into today. But, all right, so then what I want to let you know is from that moment on, he works as a shepherd. Now, notice that I did not say he became a shepherd, because he was a leader. He could not be a shepherd. You cannot become what you are not. You can work at what you are not, but you can never become what you are not. My mother was not a mother. She worked at it. She thought that's what she had. She was an Italian Catholic woman. That was her path in life. That's what she was told she had to do. And in fact, that is what she did. She was never a mother. I've had teachers who were never teachers. They couldn't become a teacher. They worked at teaching, but they weren't teachers. You've had them too. We can never become what we are not. It's so important for us, however, to always strive, even if we have to put food on the table by working at something we're not. It's so important that we always strive to be that which we are. And I'm not just talking about careers here. Every Sunday, I tell you, you are whole, perfect, and complete. And I could call you up individually, each one of you, on the phone every morning and tell you you are whole, perfect, and complete, and it would be a good and purposeful phone call, because we need to hear it over and over and over again. And then we need to strive to know, to become it. To become it. You can't be what you are not. It's just one of the most powerful teaching points in the story. But what happened is Moses couldn't get that. And this is what happens to us. You know, when we're doing something that we're not, God will always be whispering. It's a little louder and louder, and finally, one day, it was a burning bush. You know? And then he asked Moses to do something very, very challenging. He asked Moses to go to the Pharaoh and say, tell him to let my people go. Well, I mean, that was a totally ridiculous thing. These people were free labor to the Pharaoh. They were thousands of free laborers, both in his castle and building those things that they had and all kinds of stuff. So they were not going to let, Moses said, no, I'm not going there. This is God. And God says, well, and then he started making excuses. Did you ever notice when a good idea, a divine idea comes through to you of something that is your next step or your next idea or whatever, you have excuses? Can't do it, too old. Can't do it. I stutter. Can't do it. Something else is going wrong. I have kids. I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't have the right car. I can't do it. We do that to ourselves. We start to make excuses. And God will say what God said to Moses. Take off your shoes. You are standing on holy ground. It was God's way of saying, don't be ridiculous. Of course you can do it. I'll give you everything you need. Take off your shoes. You are standing on holy ground. Take off your sorry excuses. You are standing on holy ground. Take off that grip you have that you weren't raised right. You are standing on holy ground. Take off that ridiculous fight you have with your ex because you are standing on holy ground. And finally Moses said, okay, all right. And God said, by the way, I'm going to give you everything you'll ever want or need to have this work for you. And he did. He gave him all kinds of stuff. We're going to call them encouragements. The Bible called them the plagues, but I don't like that, so we're going to call them encouragements. Okay? They went from little encouragements, like we get, to whoppers. And so he would go to the Pharaoh, and he said, let my people go. And the Pharaoh said, what, are you nuts? No, I'm not going to let your people go. And so he kept going back and going back. And every time he'd go back, he would give a little encouragement that God had sent with him. And then finally, the encouragements got by the midway, and he started doing what you and I do. He started saying, okay, all right. But it never happened. Sound familiar? Okay, no more flour and sugar. No, I'm not going to do it. No more, no more, no more, no more, no more. Okay, no more. And then the potluck comes. I intended to do it. I meant to do it. At the time, it sounded good. And it's impossible to do. It's hard to do. So that's what happened to the Pharaoh. He kept reneging on everything until finally God sent the whopper. Now, here's the thing. When the whopper comes, God says also to the Israelites, take some, this is going to be a really big one. So take a little blood of the lamb and put it over your doorway. And then I'll go around. I won't give you the whopper. I'll excuse you from the whopper. Now look, this can be misconstrued to think that God is playing favorites based on nationality. It's not true. The way we read this story is that God always gives us an out. Always gives us an out. A way to turn it around. Even at the last minute, God gives us a way to turn it around. You know, Ernest Holmes was very clear about this. He said, you know, this idea of cause and effect can always be interrupted. At the moment that you get spiritual principle, at the moment that you come in alignment with what happened and how you can change your life to become in alignment with God, it ends right there. And that's what that symbolizes for us. We can always turn it around. We can always change it in our lives. So the next time the burning bush comes for you because you haven't listened, maybe you got fired because you weren't listening before. Maybe you got a DUI because you weren't listening before. Maybe your burning bush is you end up in the emergency room with little white things all over your chest because you weren't listening to your cholesterol numbers before, whatever it is. Know that even at that moment, you can know that you stand on holy ground. And within that holy ground, God's love and purpose is with you. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that we are in the heart and the mind and the love of God. I give thanks. I give thanks to every single being in this church. I give thanks. I simply give praise on this day of Passover, on this day of Palm Sunday, a day of praise. I just give praise. Everything I look at. I don't even have to name it, because everything I see, I simply give praise to. I give thanks. I release this word into the law, and together we'll say, and so it is.